Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of What's on Your Shelf. I'm your host Mulure Mike, and today we are hosting a legal practitioner, a guy who's traveled this world through books, and he's going to take us through his shelf, where we're going to interact with law, we're going to interact with tech, data. Just graduated from studying data. He will tell us about that. But above everything else, a gentleman who's written extensively on poetry and interfacing two worlds of law, society, packaged well in poetry. Who am I talking about? Today we have on What's on Your Shelf none other than Patrick Lavince.
My full name's Patrick Lavince Wandare Ondego, but my peers call me PLO. And I wear so many hats, but the foremost, I'm human to begin with. Let me just demystify that. And right now, I'm a practicing lawyer. I'm an in-house corporate counsel, contract and legal counsel in a medical, in a world-class medical diagnostic facility out there. And I'm a poet. I love words, and I've done poetry for about 11 years. I'm also a voiceover artist. Yeah, I'm also a master of ceremony and events moderator once in a while. I'm a mentor. I have a couple of people, that look up to me. I mean, students, not just the campus, but those, the Kenya School of Law and others in different, professions, not just legal. I'm also a public speaker and an orator. So yeah, I do some of these, sessions and meetings and caucuses once in a while as well. Yeah, books have been part and parcel of me. You see, like breath is to life,
Yeah.
and like salt is to the sea. They are so inseparable. When you take that oath before the Chief Justice, we swear or we affirm that we will uphold, we will defend, safeguard, and protect the rule of law. So how then would you go against the oath, which is solemn actually? What we were taught at school is filtered history, is a history that was meant for the establishment, and history that was meant to be so soothing, but which was not the case. I think beyond the confines of the classrooms, that's where you would easily understand the kind of lies we were sold. I knew I had no talent, but in 2012. I got fascinated by words. I think I was still in high school thereabout. And I started scribbling words here and there. In 2007, there was the 44 against 1. This time, I mean, last year, it was 2 against the rest. So this conversation will keep on, enlarge as long as we become comfortable.
Just get into it, Patrick.
Yeah.
What makes a good lawyer?
What makes a good lawyer?
Yeah.
All right. Before I do respond on that, there's this infamous. Yeah, I would call it infamous because it is widely misused. That a good lawyer knows the law, but the best lawyer knows the judge. Yeah, people have misused that phrase time without number, and I think you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
So I think what makes a good lawyer? What makes a good lawyer is, first of all, discipline. Second of all, you have integrity, time consciousness, and your client needs at heart. I mean, just trying to draw a boundary between, not personalizing your client's case, but be a representative of the client and just try to give your utmost best, because lawyers have, different duties. We have a duty to our own client, a duty to the courts, a duty to the members of the public, a duty to one another, counsel to counsel, lawyer to lawyer. Yeah, so despite the spheres of duties, what you have to ensure is that you encompass and you envisage, the characters that are reflective of who you are as a person, and for the noble profession that law has been time without number known for. Yeah, yeah,
But I just want to probe further on that
yeah.
statement. A good lawyer knows the judge. It's a very open secret in the Kenyan, I would say, justice sector. What's your thought on that?
Well, just to borrow from what the Swahili sages said, nazi mbovu harabu ya nzima. In other words, if one particular coconut has been infested, with could be molds, could be fungi, could be whatever it is that makes it not fit for consumption, it may end up affecting the rest of the coconuts in a particular circuit wherever they are. So borrowing from that particular concept, we have our own code of conduct as lawyers, or as advocates rather, because lawyers may not really be persons admitted to the bar, but an advocate is a lawyer, and not all lawyers are advocates.
Yeah.
So there is a slight distinction.
Yeah.
So advocates generally, they have different mechanisms of how their conduct are to be kept in check. We have the disciplinary tribunal. You have the complaints committee, depending on the gravity of the issue at hand that perhaps a client has brought to the attention of the chairpersons of and members of those particular institutions. Yeah, so it is not a secret that corruption has not just bedeviled the country, not just the executive, not just parliament, but equally the judiciary. And we've seen even judges being reprimanded, and tribunals set up to even question their conduct, and then implicated in such scandals. So those judges, some of them have resigned, and so even some lawyers implicated, in some advocates implicated in all this mess. That particular conduct at the end of the day has to be kept in check. So corruption is a vice detested by some, I can't say everyone, because for others, or for the rest, it may seem like a normal thing, but it ends up impeding justice, because you can imagine if justice is sold to the highest bidder. It's like an auction, that the courts are an auction. When the hammer falls, whoever carries the day is the one with the highest bid. So it ends up affecting the marginalized, those who may not really have access to legal representation. Yeah, so I would say, I think that's the perspective I would look at this with. Yeah.
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 Sometimes a lawyer represents a client who's killed
Yeah.
or who's massively robbed the public of public resources.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does it ever get to a point where a lawyer feels guilty?
Well, that is subjective, but I would look at it in this instance. Well, advocates are governed by the cab rank rule. Of course, when you're approached, for legal representation by a client, you can take up the briefs. The only exceptions, or extraneous circumstances whereby you may not take up, the case. And one of those circumstances where whatever the party you are involved in is meant to propagate an illegality. And there's no way you would justify an illegality as a defender, as a protector, and as an upholder of the rule of law, as advocates are. Because when you take that oath before the Chief Justice, we swear, or we affirm, that we will uphold, we will defend, safeguard, and protect the rule of law. So how then would you go against the oath, which is solemn actually, for you to now do that which is not agreeable, not just to your own standards as a person, but equally to the code of conduct that governs the society. So I would answer that way. Yeah.
We're now transitioning to you.
Yeah.
What are some of the things in your early life, your childhood, that define who you are today?
One, hard work. Two, belief in oneself. Three, the God's grace. Then the other thing will be knowing you as a person and not, have to place obstacles to your own potential. So why am I saying this? Growing up, education was a sacrosanct aspect of our livelihood as kids. I mean, I was born in a quite a good family, large family. I have brothers, I have sisters. So I'm the fifth born in that family. Of course, the last born on the side of boys, and I have a twin brother, fraternal though. People say you look alike.
Okay.
So my father was that kind of a person who loved books. I mean, you couldn't develop that relationship with him if you're not a performer. So it stuck with me. I mean, as a kid, just going up, going about my business, my education. Yeah, to be a top performer, and indeed I was. I mean, top three as from classroom all the way to campus to beyond even the confines of those parameters for education. Yeah, so that hard work I think was inculcated in books, and because today this session focuses on our shelves as
Yeah.
authors, as writers, or as persons who've made significant impact in the society.
Yeah.
I would say our books have been part and parcel of me. You see, like breath is to life,
Yeah.
and like salt is to the sea. They are so inseparable. So there's no way you would separate breath from life unless it's death technically. But as long as you are human, still wandering about this fraction of an earth, as Franz Fanon put it in his book, it's ideal, that character, that personality, those values, I still hold them to date. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is a very good cue to now ask, what's on your shelf?
What's on my shelf?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have so many books, but those that do, stand out, you have the Guarded Gate by Daniel Okrent. You have the histories of the hand. I mean, there's books that by David Anderson. This thing he talks about, the dirty war that the Brits, propagated in our country during the Mau Mau, fight, and the struggle and freedom, of liberation. And I have Timothy Njoyes, who was also one of, the greatest pioneers of freedom. His memoir during the elections in the 90s, that clip, however much it circulates around, it still gives you the impression of how hard it was to have a multi-party system in our own country. So Joya's memoir speaks so personally to how far we've come as a country. And it makes me sad that, right now we're trying to take, 1,000 steps back to where we came from. And that will mean the fights, that Njoya brought on board, and, the Koigi Wamweres, the Kenneth Matibas, those kind of persons, then I think their efforts will all be in vain. I've also had a look at Kidneys for the King by Miguna. I mean, people take him to be a controversial human being, but I've had a sit down with Dr. Miguna, and I think if you got to understand from his perspective, because people judge from their own perspective. They haven't taken an initiative to ask a person, why are you the way you are, and why are you doing things differently from the norm or from the customs that we are so known to. So the three sides of a coin. There is your side, there's my side, but there's the ultimate side of that coin, the truth side of the coin, which separates, both, divides of truth.
Yeah.
So,
I want to hold. I don't want to run
okay,
into that one
okay,
because I want to go back to Timothy
all
Njoya.
right, okay,
Kindly, if you allow me.
okay, okay,
Um, Timothy Njoya,
yeah,
the one of the key things that come to mind when you hear that name is that time he was being caned. I don't know if you remember that. He chained himself at Vigilant
yes,
House.
yes, yes. That's the clip I was talking about. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Where were you during that season?
Hey, okay. That was prior to 95. I was born in 1995. So that was between 1991, 1992, thereabout, just, slightly before the multi-party democracy kicked in. And I think what we were taught at school is filtered history, is a history that was meant for the establishment, and history that was meant to be so soothing, but which was not the case. I think beyond the confines of the classrooms, that's where you would easily understand the kind of lies we were sold. So I got to learn more beyond what the evolving world. That was a history book we used to have back in high school,
Yeah.
and you would find the many atrocities, that were meted on such people, the Timothy, Njoyas, the Kenneth Matibas, the Martin Shikukus, those kind of persons. And even in 1975, the murder of Josiah Mwangi Kariuki. In 1969, the murder of Tom Joseph Moyer, the murder of Pio Gama Pinto just a year or so before, in the towards 19 towards just the 20th century, there about just before the 2000, there was the murder of Dr. Robert Okwe. So all these kind of assassinations, I mean, the state machinery meted on such people whose only fault or mistake was to fight for a better
Yeah.
governance system. So dissents, then were not really allowed. But at least right now with the new constitution, freedom of expression is something that we can be proud of. Yeah.
But when you look at that,
Yeah.
and you've listed a couple of them,
Yeah.
I'm taken to the just recent Gen Z protests, where I feel like we are still battling the same issues. What's your
Yeah.
take when you reflect on that, when you think about that history, and you look at what recently happened in this country when the young people of this country were standing and calling for change?
Yeah. Well, it's sad to begin with, because like I said, we didn't come this far to just get this far. So it is so sad that we will be taking steps more than 50 years of developments of issues that we needed clarified on, and that's where we are back now. That would mean you want to suppress freedom of speech, you want to suppress freedom of communication, you want to suppress the right to information, you want to suppress dissent, you want to suppress access to justice. And why? Because you see, those who were abducted the other day, the Longton brothers, Bob Jaggi, they were actually released after a month.
Yeah.
And how convenient, these persons were released when the current Inspector General of Police, Douglas Kanja, was being sworn into office. Coincidences don't just happen, but I think the fact that the habeas corpus application made in court was not complied with, the orders of the court Justice Lawrence Mugambi were not complied with. Mr. Masengeli defied court summons, not just once, not just twice. And the arrest, the abductions because of the Gen Z protest. So I think it is state-sponsored violence against the people, and it is quite unfortunate because the state should be, an overseer, of good governance. But the Gen Z protest awakened, another perspective of governance, that our power, the Article 1 power, the sovereignty of the people, under the Constitution is vested in the people. So the people can withdraw that power. They can take it back because we've only delegated to our direct representatives, who are the members of parliament. Indirectly, you have the judges and the large judiciary, the executive, the president. That's a direct, donation of power. So I feel the conversations need to be had on matters good governance, on matters inclusion,
Yeah.
on matters gender, on matters persons with disability. Yeah, so there are so many facets of governance that we need to work on, and I'm certain the Gen Z protest was not in vain, despite having 61 souls, unfortunately being lost during the protest, and shaping, another conversation, because it is us who have a future for this country.
Yeah.
It is the Gen Z who knows how hard it is to go without food for a day. I mean, it is them who knows how unemployment sounds like. It is them who understand what, they go through just to even get through their education. So I think that's the conversation that the Gen Z protest actually awakened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now, my legal knowledge is limited.
Yeah.
But there is something that still did not add up to me. You've just
Yeah.
mentioned the swearing in of the IG.
Yeah.
But now, when you're looking at that whole process where somebody is forgiven after sentencing had happened, how does that happen? Help me understand.
Well, contempt of court proceedings. In quoting what the judge said that particular day, is they are not meant to follow the normal process in the criminal justice system, arrest, trial, mitigation, all those kind of things. So what happened is, there was conviction, and there was sentencing, but that sentencing was supposed to happen upon the defiance of the 7-day grace period that was given to Mr. Masingeli. Had he not shown up to court and informed the court exactly what happened. So what he did on the last day, just before the sentencing was supposed to, the 6-month sentencing was supposed to begin, and the Ministry of Interior and the National Administration, Professor Kindiki, was supposed to ensure these orders are actually enforced. So again, how convenient, they show up, in court on the last day, is put on the dock, which is a good thing, at least to be for accountability purposes, to have someone of such position in government to take the dock, hold up your Bible, affirm on oath that whatever you'd be saying there is nothing but the truth. That for me was a positive step. However much, sad it was for him to defy the court orders and not present or just explain to the court, not even present, but just explain to the court where the whereabouts of the Longton brothers and Bob Jaggi. So what the court did, of course, the right to be heard is paramount, and he was put to task, quote unquote cross-examined as well, and he offered the apologies. So sadly, another judge may not have accepted the apology, but the honorable Lawrence Mugambi did accept the apologies, and he was pardoned. So the conviction and the sentencing both are set aside.
Yeah. But now, what precedence does it set? Because I'm sure this will show up somewhere in a certain matter somewhere.
Well, as we speak, the High Court judge summoned again the current Inspector General of Police, Douglas Kanja, to explain the whereabouts of, I think, the Wajir County MCA, who was missing then, and still missing, I do suppose. Yeah, so I think it's from one baton to the other, which is quite unfortunate. And for me, it set a bad precedent, because when you defy court orders, it means you are above the law. But no one is above the law, not even the president. So everyone is subject to every letter of the law. So yeah, it is set a bad precedent technically, and the apology wasn't, it was overtaken by events in as much as he was given time to, to plead for his mercy.
Yeah.
Fortunately, his apologies were accepted, and he's a free man.
So if I conclude on this one,
Yeah.
what is that one thing that stands out for you in this book?
I think how Njoya tells his story from from the deepest parts of his existence. He owns his story. He tells of the atrocities that future generation may actually come and learn from whatever he has documented. And his infights, with Moi, how much it took. It almost cost him his life, actually. Just fighting for multi-party and good governance. So no one wants change, but change is constant and change must happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Then we move to Kidneys for Kings. Quick overview of this book. You're reading through pages. Where did it leave you?
Well, I would say Kidneys for the King is a good book, and I think what Dr. Miguna talks about, it talks about it talks from a perspective of being good, and not just being good with your ink, but telling a story in such a way that make people understand exactly what are you reading as a person. So for me, he did justice, and I think it even came because of our own unfoldings here in the country, and what he was trying to portray. And I think that king has been used metaphorically to just mean the kind of persons he encompasses himself within. Yeah, so yeah, that's the summary.
Yeah.
I don't want to go deeper into the book because Daktari may be watching, and he may want to have tete-a-tete with me.
No, but you are now our ambassador as somebody who's read it ahead of the rest of us. What is that thing that also you would say stood out for you in this book?
I think for we readers, what sometimes stands out is even the cover, because when you look at the cover, it has already got you into a place of wanting to peruse through. So when he's talking about the current state, or at least then, which I'm certain he has actually maintained whatever is happening or was happening by the time he was publishing this book, the corruption, the impunity. I mean, it's so stark. It's so glaring for everyone to see. So as you know, he's always against corruption, bad governance, because he's been a victim before. You can remember the JKA fiasco, his deportation, which was quite unfortunate because he's a citizen of Kenya, and sometimes all these wars are just politically instigated, and that's why, I mean, that's what he's trying to document here. So despite the year of publication of this book, whatever he was trying to address is still alive, with us today.
Do you want him to run for president?
I wouldn't mind. I mean, he has great ideas. He's equal to the task. I mean, the fact that he vied for the gubernatorial seat, then he can't give it a shot. Yeah.
His politics is different.
Yeah.
How would you reflect on his approach to political issues of this country?
Well, again, that will be subjective, but what I would normally pick out from what he talks about are the key components of governance. I may not perhaps agree with the the personal tags or anything, but I would agree with him on the basis of addressing issues from a governance point of view, and these issues are quite universal. So the personal wars and the personal exchanges may not be for me, but he makes sense on most of these issues of government, because corruption is corruption. It doesn't have any other name. So I think he's only calling it out from a standpoint of one, being a victim of all these atrocities, two, trying to also hold accountable persons he campaigned for and wanted to sign into power, and which is a good thing, because not everyone who voted for this government would boldly perhaps address these pressing issues that all Kenyans are facing, regardless of whether you voted for the current powers or you didn't vote for them. So I think that's where Dr. Miguna scores points. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Then I move to something else. Britain's Gulag. Tell us about this one.
Britain's Gulag talks about, I think, just the fall of Britain's empire. Of course, we were from being a British protectorate to being a British colony to being, I mean, having found the self governance, and despite all that, the kind of I also call them atrocities throughout that transition, because there are so many undocumented deaths in the country, which I think our history books may not have captured, or never even captured at all. So it is a profound, poignant kind of read, and it places you in a position of being someone who may not really agree with how nice independence or the fight for independence was, because we lost so many people. I mean, persons who are tortured, persons who are humiliated, persons whose cultures were considered to be inferior, persons um, uh, uh, who had to give up their lands. Not even give up. I mean, they had to, their lands were taken away from them. That's why we have the white settlers, and those settlement schemes being placed in those settlement schemes, being made to walk around with like kipande in your neck. It was a whole mess, a whole kind of orchestrated, deliberately orchestrated violence against the people, and it tells of a story of a country that is still healing from the wrath that was meted upon them by the colonizers, the Brits. Yeah.
Yeah. What does this book tell you about our history?
That our history is so filtered, that our history is extremely dark, that our history is needs to be told, not just in Kiswahili and English, but in our own local languages, adopted, for everyone to understand. Because when you talk it out from your own mother tongue or from your own native language, it's able for you. I mean, you are able to understand the depth, the sadness, the wars, the sound of bullets, the sound of, all those guns. I mean, when your people were being killed in the fight for, independence, those kind of soldiers who were sent to Burma to go and fight there. I mean, they died as, soldiers there. They were buried there. So it gives you a perspective of how war has been something inbred. And of course, we have the collaborators being, persecuted by your own people, to just make the Britain feel part and parcel of the system. So it's a good book for those who want to learn about history, but it is a very sad read at the end of the day as well. Yeah.
How would you say these books, because there's Britain's Gulag, I've seen The History of the Hand, which also almost touches on the same thing.
Yeah.
Timothy Njoya's We Are the People,
Yeah.
Kidneys for Kings,
Yeah.
Miguna Miguna. I can see From Jomo to Uhuru by Sharad Rao.
Yeah.
they almost talk about, they would touch on similar themes.
Yes.
How would you say that these books have opened your legal eye or allowed you to pay attention legally to certain themes and phenomenons?
Right, thanks. I being accustomed to these books have opened me up to the realm of possibilities in the legal space. First of all, when it comes to access to justice, like Sharad Jha was, he's a lawyer. He was, in the DPP space, and Miguna is equally a lawyer, and
Almost became DPP. There was something
almost.
similar. There was something similar to that.
Yeah. So all these books have shaped my perspective in the legal space in terms of addressing the plight of those in need, and even offering some of our services, pro bono, especially during the Gen Z protest. You saw a couple of advocates out there. I was one of them, just trying to be part and parcel of, representation against, all these excesses of force that the police were using against, these people. And yeah, so accountability, I think, is also one of the key components of, thematic areas across these books. Yeah, so accountability for us as advocates has been to see how some of the decisions of the directives being made by the executive, are they sound? Even with Parliament itself, some of the laws being passed, are they really sound? If not, then you challenge them in court. Some of the appointments even being made in some of these dockets, do they follow the due process? If not, you do challenge. So it encompasses all that aspect of accountability. Yeah.
I'm struggling with the word accountability a lot, especially when we look at the governance space. And I don't want just to focus on the executive. But when you look at the intermarriage between the three arms of government, I don't think it gives any hope of accountability. What's your thought?
Well, the separation of powers, as was espoused by Montesquieu, is a key component of governance. We have three arms of government: the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, all independent of each other, but interdependent with each other. So the correlation has been quite tumultuous, if you ask me, because sometimes when the judiciary is starved of budgetary allocation, and it's Parliament that has the power to appropriate these funds that get disbursed to the judiciary, and the executive equally make policies, because the cabinet is the apex policy making organ in the country. So there has been a disconnect, because you find orders being made by the judiciary not being, abided by the judiciary, but by the executive rather, and not even Parliament. So it is a superiority complex, and tug and war contest, if you ask me, that which arm is the superior arm and which one will call the shots.
Yeah. You're a poet.
Yeah.
How did you find yourself in poetry?
How did I find myself in poetry? All right, good question. Disclaimer, I knew I had no talent. But in 2012, I got fascinated by words. I think I was still in high school thereabout. And I started scribbling words here and there, gave them to my friends to read. And of course, they're like, nah, this doesn't make sense. You need to do better. Well, I mean, truth hurts, it does hurt. But if you really want to make a difference, then you have to use that pain to build and improve on yourself. So that's exactly what I did. And in Form 3, I think I improved on those words, made them better, gave them to my friends to read, and they're like, yeah, these words do make sense. And they're like, yeah. So it got to a point we had writing pads. I'm certain you know them. And they would reserve a writing pad for me to just scribble whatever I wanted to scribble. And I didn't know they would send all this poetry to girls' schools. So when I went for academic funkies, as they used to call them, the maths contest, the English contest, the Swahili contest, all this kind of academic, sessions, I would be approached, from nowhere. So just shouting your name, a lady shouting your name from nowhere, like, hey, are you the poet? Yeah, I'm like, yeah, this is me. So I was shocked. How did you know about me? So it clicked. Those letters, those writing pads that I used to write poetry on, it spread like wildfire to these, girls' schools. And I think from then, that's when I knew something I can do, professionally. And I was inspired by Maya Angelou. May she rise in poetry. She actually died a day before my birthday. She died on 28th of May 2014. And my birthday is normally 29th of May. So, yeah, she inspired me through her works. Like, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, Still I Rise, one of the best masterpieces by Maya Angelou. So, yeah, so that's where I found myself. And here I am almost 12 years later. Still a poet, yeah.
It's one thing to recite poems, it's another thing to write them. It's another thing to publish books.
Yeah,
That trajectory.
yeah.
How did you end at publishing? Because it very many talents die at high school. I know very many footballers who are amazing footballers in high school.
Yeah.
Once you come out here,
Yeah.
some of us were good in certain things in high
Yeah.
school. They
Yeah.
go out there.
Well, I yeah, you're right. I mean, it's one thing to write poetry, to recite poetry, and it's another thing to translate that poetry into cogent book where you can sell those books. You can, perform on a live stage. So, it took me years to even publish my first book, and I think by the time I even get to publish my book or to write even one single poem rather, I've spent like 20 drafts just for one particular poem or poetry. Yeah, so first things first, I published my first book in 2017 when I was in first year, second year actually, in campus at law school, and it was the foundation of better things to come. So years later, I published 3 more books. So right now I'm working on the 5th poetry book.
Yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully I will release it next year if God wills. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take us through your 4 books
Yeah.
and quickly help us understand what's in them.
All right. These are my books. My first book, Last of My Ink. Well, it's a collection of poems. I mean that seek to give just new dimension, new meaning to to the way society perceives a couple of issues, including persons living with disability, gender-based violence, purpose, spirituality, and love and loss as well. So this is my first book that I think catapulted me to the spheres of poetry, and it was published by the Writers Guild Kenya. Then my second book, this Moonlight, a Night of 1,000 Words, while it was published in 2019 and launched on October 5th, that same year. Yeah, so this is a collection of poems that is actually sat in the deepest, and the darkest core of life, but illuminated, for the soul. And it is just a reflection of the mind on love. It is also a mirror of hope. It is, where your thoughts will just open up, your skull will crack, and the strikes of your heart, will give life, I think, the sweetest kind of melody. So it encompasses a couple of, themes on hope, on love, and other issues of thematic areas. And then my third book, Raindrops and Roses. Well, I'm more inclined to say that this is my best book, but I don't want to do that because I always strive to beat my own competition. And yeah, this is a very profound book. It's a bouquet of poems, of course, from the title Raindrops and Roses. So it's a bouquet of poems of discernment, and love, governance that we are talking about, and patriotism, mental health, depression, anxiety, or those kind of things, and affirmations, loss and grief, and generally flowers of hope planted by the flowing waters beneath the eyelids, and white of eyes. So it's a two book in one: Cancer Sun and Gemini Moon. That's the first part of the book, and then the second part of the book is called Sent Letters. And sent letters used metaphorically because those kind of letters, when you send, they will never be responded to. So that's why it talks about grief generally. So I tend to immortalize persons of loss along the way into this book, calling them by names. I mean, just trying to make grief, be part and parcel of you, because time never heals. I think it only makes you get used to the pain, and I think that's what grief is all about. And then my last book, okay, The May in Way. Well, this book is focused on four thematic areas. You have healing, you have self-worth, you have discernment, and then you have rebirth. So I think it is like a sequel to Raindrops and Roses, but it's from a standpoint of you as a person. And how does healing taste like? How does rebirth feel like for you and to you? What does discernment mean? I mean, to be able to discern your worth, to understand that you don't have to settle for something just because it's available. And then last but not least, you are self-worth. I mean, how can you separate, your self-worth from what people used to? But you don't have to translate your spirit for someone who doesn't understand your soul language. I think that's what self-worth is all about. Yeah. So those are my books. Yeah.
I want to go back to Raindrops and Roses.
Yeah.
And you've spoken about grief.
Yeah.
What about grief is so outstanding for you that you've picked it as a theme to communicate?
Well, grief for me has been like a snowball that grows on you and then crashes without you even expecting it to do so. And reason being, I've lost persons close to me. I mean, and it has shaped, how I've perceived, things time without number. And these are family members. These are, our relatives. These are good friends, that have walked with along this particular journey. So I think I've known grief from all facets of, of adjectives, and to choose to still breathe amidst all the pain and the loss. I think that's what really becomes the task of a man. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you pick your themes?
How do I pick my themes? I think how my relation to what conversations I am, I find myself in, and that will mean how do I perceive, these conversations, and my experiences equally contribute to how I do pick my theme, and other people's experiences also contribute to how I pick my themes, because poets don't just write for themselves, but at least they have to write from their own standpoint, from their own, personal background, their own story, and then it's easy for them to open up to others to allow themselves in. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Would you pick any poem from any of your anthologies that you believe would resonate deeply with somebody who is watching us today?
Well, yes, but I would say I think all the poems
All of them.
I've written in these books
Yeah.
would resonate to everyone who is watching, because I think I always try and factor in everyone, women, man, fatherhood, motherhood as well. Factor in children, factor in love, factor in loss, factor in even persons living with disability. So that'll be the time when I'm called to perform poetry somewhere. I
Yeah.
think when I study the audience, I already have something in me. So everyone feels included in what I do.
I have one I have picked. Masks follow.
All right, okay.
You act like you're fine when I am around. You draw a smile every morning for me to be assured that your night was sound. For me to know that you're doing okay. Lies that bite. But on the bedrock of your heart, you know that the tears want to outlet. Your tears want an outlet. You can't stop but cry because you know that the only person who can dry your eyes is the person who caused you this unbearable pain. It's me.
Yeah, your question.
Tell us about this one.
It is always said that the person who causes you the most, pressing and breaking of pain is the same person who can actually, heal you. Yeah, so because I mean, it's like holding on is is you trying to let go, but you can't technically. So I think what informed my writing of that piece was because sometimes love may not be everything. I mean, love is not the only thing, and it isn't this the only perhaps anchor to how much you want to progress with someone in life. And sometimes not everything that comes in the name of love is actually love. Sometimes it is because it's just a moment of weakness, and try and draw a balance between the two is where the flash does meet the bone. So that's what I would say about
That
it.
one sounded very personal.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, of course, I always write from a very deep
What was
you know,
going on
perspective.
that season?
Well, a poet doesn't explain about whatever poems he writes, but at least it's something that you can easily relate to. But I think for me, I whatever was happening, and of course, immersing myself in someone else's experience,
Yeah.
and just trying to write about this. That's what gives a good poem that particular name. So yeah.
According to you, Patrick, what makes a poem impactful?
First of all, the content. Two, the of course poetry, most of it is meant to be felt, and when it is supposed to be felt, it means you have to it has to evoke conversations within you, the emotions as well. So I think those are the two components of poem, and above all, it has to leave a mark that after this poem, you be thinking about something. You may not really provide an answer to that particular moment, but there has to be something that is left with you to just think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I think about the legal world and the poetry world, there are two, I would say, extensive worlds on their own individual merits. How have you managed to fuse this world? At what point do they meet? At what point do they help each other? How have you managed to navigate through these two worlds?
Poetry and the law is like two miscible liquids, and I think it has been advantageous to me as a poet in terms of the use, the expressions of my words. It has helped me speak through the law, even when I'm drafting documents. Of course, there's the literature side of the law that you have to incorporate for the document to be more appealing, for the document to be more persuasive, for whatever type of documentation you're working on, to be able to just merge at some point. Yeah, so poetry, the diction, I mean, the language, I mean, the punctuation, the alignment, all those have contributed to, the literature of the law, and even helping in arguments as well. Legal arguments, that is just to arrive at a harmonized and sound, conclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I found outstanding, maybe just reading through your works, is that you are part of the team that contributed to the Bribery Act. Tell us about that.
Yeah, while working for CAPSI Foundation, the Kenya Private Sector Alliance Foundation, I was a program officer in the legal person. Yeah, so I was a private sector liaison, with the National Assembly, the Office of the Attorney General, and now coordinating the private sector's engagement on the development of the brevet regulations. So that will mean running, errands here and there, coordinating. Does the is the AG done with this documentation? Have they forwarded the same to Parliament? So yeah, and did the private sector's input, was it considered? And I'm happy to note that 99% of the private sector's input was considered in the final published Bribery, Act regulations of 2022 and the Bribery Act guidelines of 2022. Yeah. Yeah.
When you look at the acts, when you look at bribery, is almost the order of the day. I would say it's an open secret.
Yeah.
In not only in the public sector but also in the private sector, in actually virtually every aspect of our day-to-day lives. What is this act seeking to address, and how would you reflect on it as to the specific aspects of our day-to-day lives that this act was speaking to?
Well, corruption is both in the public and private sector. So is bribery. Bribery is just a component of corruption, and what these regulations and guidelines are meant to do is to assist the private sector to put in place model procedures. And right now, the model procedures that are supposed to be adopted by the public and the private sector, and customize those model procedures to suit the operations of the respective companies. Because Safaricom may have different operations from Coca-Cola, you understand? And just to see what are the reporting mechanisms. Does the private sector or the public sector have a whistleblower policy, for example? I mean, how do you report, the bribery and corruption? How do you address it internally before it gets to ESCC? What, coordinating, and the coordination measures have been put in place between ESCC and your organization to fast track all this? Have you perhaps even gone ahead to sensitize your own staff members? Yeah, so those are some of the conversations that, the regulations and the guidance are trying to have, just to assist the private to public sector to be at par when it comes to compliance. Yeah.
It always feels like there's an on and off button on most of these issues, because when we talk about policy and the papers that we've created, both legal and academic, that should inform our modes of operation, they're impressive. But it always looks like once that has been done, is put in a shelf somewhere, then we proceed with our lives. From your standpoint, you wear 3 hats today. You're an entertainer. You're an advocate of the High Court.
Yeah.
and also, I would say, a data and a tech expert. Let me say, somebody who understands these 3 dimensions of things that we are interacting with on a day-to-day basis. Where are we missing it when it comes to us understanding and interpreting the law?
Well, I would say our implementation of our legislative and policy framework has been bottom of the barrel. I mean, it's because there's no political goodwill in most of these implementation. That even if we were to craft, we have good laws, we do. We have sometimes good policies, and we keep on making more and developing more. But when it comes to the execution of the of whatever is in those policies and legislative framework, lacks the will, because how do you translate these ideas into practice? How do you navigate around the quagmire surrounding the implementation in order to solve a particular stalemate? So the political goodwill lacks. Okay, I mean, we can have good corruption laws, but how will the law enforcement agency comply? And coordinate with the judiciary in terms of nailing these people? Do our investigative agencies, the DCI, does it have the necessary resources? Because DCI has been subject to condemnation because of the abductions that have been happening time without number, and that in itself cast an indictment on such offices, and there needs to have conversations to be had, like, who are these rogue officers who are tainting the image of such investigative agents, even the police service, because DCI is just a component of the National Police Service. How does the Inspector General direct the DCI to carry out investigations? How does the National Police Service coordinate with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution to ensure that there's a seamless working relationship? So there's kind of things. The only barrier, the political goodwill. And once the political goodwill lacks, everything else fails, because we've struggled so hard to build these laws to what they are. But what's next?
Your works have spoken on several issues: patriotism,
Yeah,
societal issues,
yeah,
majorly love, grief,
yeah,
some of which we've mentioned here.
yeah.
What's your hope for the reader? What's your hope for the person who holds your works?
But first of all, they may find themselves, they may see themselves through me. And in those words, they may find healing in the spaces in between my pages. They may find, their lost glory through these books. And they may also find, their souls replenished based on how much pain they've been harboring within. At least they may also find the closure, that they're seeking. Yeah.
How do you balance those two worlds? Law, high profile cases you're handling. I've seen some of your photos. You're standing with a couple of people who you wouldn't be in those rooms if you're not making sense. But also on this other end, you've written extensively. You're still publishing.
Yeah. Well, I would say I sacrifice a lot. I wake up early by 4 a.m. I sleep late, sometimes even at around midnight. Yeah, so everyone has 24 hours with them. But what you choose to do with these 24 hours is what will set you apart from the rest. So no one has an excuse that you don't have time. Everyone has the same number of time. Your clock doesn't indicate 48 hours. It's 24 hours. And it spins you the next day. So does mine. So how do you craft your schedules? How do you plan, balance prior? Because tomorrow, actually, I know exactly what I have to do for the whole day, because I planned it today. Because if you wake up tomorrow and start thinking, what are you going to do? That's how your day fails. You end up doing nothing. So proper, prior, preparation prevents poor performance. That's the 6 rules of peace. Yeah. And I think from that standpoint, then you can gauge why I am the way I am.
Yeah. From your standpoint,
Yeah.
Patrick, how much has poetry evolved over the last couple of years?
Poetry has really transformed. Back then we used to have, the classical type of poetry, the Shakespearean type of poetry, and it moved close to the modern age poetry. So just to mention a few poets, the Robert Frost, Edgar Allan Poe, of course William Shakespeare, it goes without saying, and the Maya, Angelus, the James Baldwin as well. True. Now the modern age poetry, the Rupi Kaurs, for the author of the classic, Milk and Honey, to Rudy Francisco, to these modern poets now, they have reshaped totally, how poetry is supposed to be viewed. Only difference is whatever the modern age poets are doing, they're using the societal, appeal and the societal needs and the societal inspiration to draw from in order for them to address, these particular issues. So I think that's the balance and transition we've actually undergone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What has become common on the Kenyan streets is spoken word.
Yes.
What's your take on?
Spoken word poetry is backstage poetry, good poetry, and one of the Jordans of poetry, just a component of spoken word poetry. So you've seen the slums, people competing. Yeah, it's a good thing to be expressive and even have different languages. You've seen Sheng spoken words. You've seen native language kind of spoken word. So it evolves every day, and as long as that message reaches the last person of the ground who can relate to, who may not understand English, but they're good in Sheng, or they are good at whatever language as a substitute that they're used to. So yeah, it's that's it.
But when you look at your works,
Yeah.
how do you compare to the poetry we did in school? The Mizani, Vina, Mishororo.
Well, I would say mine is a hybrid of that and a bit of classic, poetry, which was, I think, also whatever was being taught in high school was extended from those classical, kind of poetry and then the modern poetry. So mine is just a hybrid, and at least at the end of the day, you can relate to whatever I'm trying to address.
Yeah.
Just in a deeper way. Yeah.
I saw somewhere in your writing that you've also written or spoken to the boy child. Where is the boy child today?
Well, I would say, the place of the boy child right now, I think, has taken a wide bath. I mean, it is neglected because we've given precedence, and credence to the girl child. It's not a bad thing, when they say that when you educate a girl, you educate an entire village. But who will come and empower these men to keep up with these girls who are actually empowered? So that's where we draw this particular distinction, and I think more programs, because you can't elevate someone by pulling others down. So in as much as we are empowering these girls, our women, it's also important not to forget, the boy child, because at the end of the day, we want a balanced society, not balanced in terms of the, superiority of gender, but balanced in terms of ideas, balanced in terms of intellect, balanced in terms of your contribution to the development of your country's economy, to the driving innovative ideas, shaping your village, shaping your county, shaping your country, but above all, shaping the not just Africa but even the global realms. Yeah.
You've also just concluded your studies on data.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was doing a course, an intensive, 1 week course on the data governance in Africa by the Center for Human Rights in the University of Pretoria. Yeah, so it gave me a different perspective of how data, governance is perceived across Africa. There are those countries that don't even have the data legislation. There are countries that have the data legislation, but they don't have the authority, like the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner in the country that will drive the data conversations and even be a complaint mechanisms for the data subjects whose rights have actually been infringed on, perceived or will. There are those countries, that have not ratified, the Malabo Convention, or the 2014 Malabo Convention is a convention that, addresses cybersecurity and data protection. I think around 14, 15 countries have actually addressed that. And then there's the difference between different data legislation regime and others. So that makes it hard for us to have a harmonized approach. It makes it hard for us to address common things, but with a unified or uniform legislative framework. Because you can imagine if Liberia has its own data legislation, South Africa has its own data legislation, which is called POPIA. And in Kenya, we have ours. Tanzania has theirs. Malawi has theirs. So when it comes to the AFCFTA digital protocol, the cross-border data transfer, how do you ensure that you've actually addressed data localization in your own country? And by data localization, I mean your data sovereignty, that every data should be localized, should not, if it were to be taken beyond the borders, then these are the specific measures and mechanisms that have to be put in place. So because of the divergence of the data legislative framework, it becomes hard to harmonize all this. So that's why having a uniform convention for Africa would have been ideal and ratify that particular protocol. Yeah, so I think that's it.
Where does Africa stand in the global map as far as data management is concerned?
Well, I may not quantify, but we aren't doing so well. I think we are almost at the tail end. Yeah, because when you look at Europe, the GDPR, the General Data Protection, rules and regulations and legislation in Europe covers entire Europe. So they have a uniform. The US doesn't have a cogent, data privacy framework. But for them, I think it's just a proclamation. It's not yet solidified as ours is, like the Kenya Data Protection Act of 2019. So you would find we aren't doing well, because if Europe can have a uniform, but Africa has, fragmented, for lack of a better word, fragmented data protection legislation, it becomes, a bit hard. And also with the coming up of WorldCoin, I think you remember the saga, people selling, their selling their corneas, the
Yes.
eyes, the iris being scanned. Those are biometrics being captured. But because of lack of sensitization, they may not know about that. So how does the government come in to remedy this gap, this knowledge information gap? Yeah, so that's it.
How did that case, by the way, end? Because I think there were a lot of conversations that were had subsequently to that.
Yeah, I mean, they had been found not to be illegally operating in the country, because there was a parliamentary joint task force committee, rather, in parliament that was investigating the affairs and conduct of WorldCoin. Yeah, parliament took it upon themselves. They did a report, but where did that report go? When I think one of the trips that was made by the president in the US, I think he met, with the WorldCoin founder, and I don't know what they discussed, but after that things just went down. So I didn't understand exactly what happened, and yet serious investigations are being carried out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said, political goodwill. Without it, nothing moves.
But even us as a people, do we ever follow up on those things?
Even if we do follow up, but who will unlock those doors? Yeah, it's those people sitting in those offices, and those offices are politically, those are political appointments. And if no one wants something to be moved, nothing will move unless we have a change in the occupants of those offices who can be accountable to whatever they're doing.
Patrick,
Yeah,
what's the role of me and you?
yeah.
Who, because I want to believe that we can't just sit down and say, okay, fine. We have no power. We can do nothing about it.
For advocates, we can do something because, like I say, the law side of Kenya has been through uh, through different committees, like the PAL, Public Interest Litigation Committee, the Law Society of Kenya. It has been filing these matters, at least for us to have answers.
Yeah.
For advocates, for lawyers, because we are the defenders of the rule of law. So if we feel there's an infringement, then you go to court. That has been what we've been doing. So the question should be, what have others been doing? And how would they merge with the law society of Kenya to address the societal, indoctrination, the societal illnesses, so that we can find an antidote to all this poison? Yeah.
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 What's your thought on AI?
My thought on AI. AI is meant to be to complement and actually even supplement work done by human beings. Yes, I mean, it's high time that technological advancements are put in place. But even then, we need to have a foundation whereby there is a strategy in place, there is sound, legislative and policy framework on how AI can be done. But that can be done without us having like a test kind of, test run on how AI has actually contributed to our own, components of governance. So AI is it has its own pros and cons, but as long as there's ethics, there's the ethical use of AI, then
Can AI be legislated? Should there be laws around?
yes. And even right now, as we speak, Parliament is considering a legislative framework on AI. Yeah, so it's part and parcel of their order purpose or order of business for the past 2 or so weeks ever since they came back from recess.
Yeah.
So there's that conversation, and it is an ongoing thing. So expect the strategy in place, policy, the legislative framework to equally be in place. But that's a conversation that has been ongoing since the ICT master plan, I think, of 2022 to around 2032 has been in place. So AI as a component of innovation and of ICT. Yeah.
I want to go back to data slightly.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm just curious to know, what are some of the misconceptions that we, the general public, have on data?
One, I would talk about data mining as a component of people feeling it's misuse of of their data, but sometimes what data mining intends to do is to just map out client needs in such a way that it can easily pick out clients needs or market demographic. Yeah. And then also the other misconception of AI is it is meant to take away jobs done by human beings. But no, I mean, AI is only meant to be secondary to what a human mind can do. Yeah, and I think those two really stand out. But there's that apprehension that which can be justified, like when you find a text message from a betting company promoting their own stuff. You never give your consent, you never give them your number. So the question is, who leaks this data? So that's where the sale of data takes place, because you find, this data being sold to the dark market, and they pay huge amount of money for them. When you go to buildings, you always sign against a book.
Yeah.
What's your name, your ID number?
Yeah.
So the question, we should be asking ourselves is, after you're done with the business of the day in that building, when you come back tomorrow, the next day, will your name still be there? And if so, then what is the retention period? How long will that company retain your data until they don't need it anymore? But people don't ask that. So how about if someone comes and steals that book,
Yeah.
goes with it,
I've always asked, by there I've always asked, and most of, even those security officers look at me as very stubborn, because I keep asking them,
Yes.
where will this book be
They don't
taken when
know.
it's filled up?
They don't know.
And
They are
my
not
data is there,
sensitized,
my phone number, my full names,
Yes,
the ID
it's
number.
there. And that's too much data.
It's
So
too much data.
you can imagine when someone takes up all those numbers, register their SIM cards, goes ahead to start, defrauding people. And then they are like, no, that number belongs to you. They come and arrest you. You have no idea how your number was intercepted. You have no idea how, your number was used. Yeah, and that's how fraud happens.
What are some of the rights that the general public should already know that can help them safeguard themselves in circumstances where data is being taken from them, either against their will or in a manner with which is not clear what this data is going to be used for? I'm just trying to understand, is there something I can call data rights?
Yeah, there is. There are data rights of a data subject. Under the Kenya Data Protection Act 2019, they have a right to be informed. Why are you collecting their data? For what purpose? For how long? And they have the right of access. But the right of access, it means they can access you to either rectify the information they gave you, or to have that information deleted from your systems. Yeah, so those are some of the rights that they do have, because how the Kenya Data Protection Act 2019 was developed, it is more inclined on an individual rather than a corporate or a company. So it is a personal identifiable information, PII. And that is what the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner would look at. Was the data subject rights infringed? Yes. How? This. What damages do they, are they given? Yeah. You've seen clubs being fined here and there because of, spamming someone's picture on their social media. That person didn't give consent. Yeah. You go somewhere, these clubs, establishment. Even right now, what is happening at, should be Uhuru Gardens, the Walkertown concert. They put up an entire notice that by the virtue that you are on this ground, that you've consented to have your photography taken, that is a notice, but it is not a policy, a privacy notification. What they need to do is to tell these people, hey, this is the name of the event where we're collecting your data for you to get entrance. This is how long we will be storing this, because there's no way they will rely on a blanket notice. So the ODPC spoke against that, say that is not adequate, a privacy notification. Yeah, so that's it.
Patrick, sometimes as a journalist, we are left lost somewhere in between, where where is there's a place where you're telling a story, and the story is factual. And for example, somebody is doing an investigative story, and they've recorded some illegal activity going on somewhere. On one side, this story is supposed to be published. On the other side, somebody says there needs to be consent. The virtue that this story would need consent would equally mean that the story is dead. Where are there exceptions of where consent is not required, especially for publishing a story? Sometimes you think about, and I don't know how maybe let me ask that after you've responded. Are there exceptions?
Yeah, there are exceptions to obtaining consent if the data controller feels beyond reasonable doubt that, whatever they're trying to do may actually override, your consent, and there are legitimate, interests of a lawful, basis. But when it comes to the publication of a certain information, because there's a thin line, between defamation and, you know, just, telling a story without giving that particular context and the consent. So that's, I think, what most media does, is to either curate, false names. Even during, news, you would see when a reporter is talking about and say, we have nicknamed this person this, so and so to like protect his identity. Yeah. So you have, if you can obtain direct consent, then it's possible for you to mitigate that. And you'd rather be safe than sorry, because why would you go ahead and then the first thing on your desk is a lawsuit? So it depends on the need basis and the context of whatever you want to do.
Yeah. I don't know how conversant you are with that legal framework pertaining to consent, because sometimes you're telling a story. For example, I'm a sports reporter. I've gone to report on school games. I'm taking photos, and the stories I want to tell are in very good light. These kids played, they won. This kid is the best, the most talented. To what extent is consent required?
That is okay. I mean, that is okay, because it's, there's the exception in that the information that is publicly available is not private information. Yeah, that's one of the exceptions. You don't even need consent because it is already available in the public, and you can just extract it, cite the source, and then, report. Yeah, but it is different from, coming to an event, a kid's school. There's an event, for example, a play, and you want to take pictures of kids who are not yours and then post these particular pictures. And remember, the parents are around, but you didn't obtain consent from them. You can post your kid because you are the parent and blur the rest of other kids, faces. And that's why I think these days what schools are doing, they're giving parents the consent form. Just in any case they want to take a picture and post in the school post, you consent as a parent. This is my child, yes, this is like what is happening. So by the time the school uploads it, either on the website or whatever it is, they already have our information.
Yeah. If there is a book, Patrick, that you would wish would be present in every bookshelf in this country, which book would that be?
I would talk of In the Footsteps of Mr. Cuts by Michelle Arong. I don't have it here. I think a friend borrowed and never returned. But this author, Michelle Arong, this is my October read, together with other books, Why Africa is Poor, and Best Before 9 by Sharon Guade. I bought this yesterday. Yeah, at the Sarita Expo. Yeah, so I was like, it's okay. I'll get to read that book.
I'm interested to knowing. I've hosted Sharon on the show, before, but I'd want to know what struck you to pick this.
Best Before 9. I mean, Best Before 9 is in itself a captivating title. I've told you about grief, and when you read here of life, death, and everything in between, Yeah, so I felt grief in the most extremes of ways. It's of my dad, but everyone that I've had along the way. And yeah, so the clock in itself is an imagery of how we are living on borrowed time as human beings. And yeah, I was like, I'll pick this. Yeah, so I always buy around 4 books a month. So this is the fourth book.
This is the fourth book
Yeah, for the
for the
month. For
month
the
of
month.
September.
No, for October.
For October.
Yes.
Ah,
So it's always buy around four books a month. So this is the fourth book. How lucky she was. So I'm like, okay, I'll pick this.
you've not read it yet.
No, I haven't
Okay.
even.
I'll be happy to hear
Yes,
your review.
I'll definitely. I will.
after
This one, I
reading.
think, in a week's time, I'll be done. So yeah. So Michelle Wrong, if not in the footsteps of Mr. Katz, which talks about Mobutu Sese Seko's Congo and how he depleted and instigating an instigated an economic genocide against its people. He looted DRC dry. This was a man who could fly to Brussels, come back for lunch in Paris, travel back to Kinshasa in his palatial mansion. He was that kind of a man that when he invited people for a banquet, I mean, when when you toast for the wine, at least when he's poured a bit of wine, in your glass, and then you sip it twice and leave the glass and then walk away, he will come and tell you to throw away that bottle of wine and get another one unopened and toast for you. That was how opulent he was. He had an entire artillery of of different varieties of wine. He had all those things. I mean, when his reign came to being, people invaded his palace, went and quote unquote swam in those bathtubs, drank wine, depleted all those things. But it was a tragic end to a man who was the person behind the assassination of Patrice Emery Lumumba, because Patrice Lumumba was a PA by then of Mobutu, and of course, actually, it's Mobutu was Patrice's PA, and of course the power rivalry, the Kasavumbu, the Kabilas, yeah. So it has been a chain of sadness, yeah, and of course that goes without saying. The Congo massacre by King Leopold II of Belgium. That's one of the most undocumented, genocide. No one knows what happened. People talk about the Holocaust. They forgot DRC here, close to 1 to 3 million people, Africans, massacred, and that reduced DRC's population by a huge amount.
DRC is still bleeding today.
It is.
And sometimes I feel like its rich land in minerals and agricultural produce has been its biggest burden. And as somebody who has international law expertise, why is it so hard for Congo to be assisted?
Well, like I said, political goodwill. Everyone has interest in this. I mean, cobalt, which is highly mined in DRC, and one of the components used in the manufacture of some of the Apple products. I mean, it's that way. I mean, it is man-made, man-made chaos, and that makes it hard to add it, because everyone has interest, not just locally, but even globally. Because and even child labor, so huge, those mines in DSC, and all these atrocities that are meted against on the people. It brings this political stability of this country to to the last, flow of empathy, and no one really cares much, as long as the rich steals and the poor remains poor. No one will take plight of what DRC, is doing. And I think for more than 30 years, yeah, DRC is still bleeding because of the foundations that are desecrated by Mobutu and the King Leopold as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
How is Kenya different? Because sometimes I feel like we are at that place. Because when you look at some of the cases we have today, I don't think I'd ever imagined that in my lifetime I would hear somebody has stolen 1 billion shillings. Today we've gotten to a place where we are no longer talking about millions being stolen. We are talking about billions. And as much as sometimes we want to blame our backwardness on the colonial administration, our own leaders have done worse. And they've aided that, how do I say it? Looting of those resources. And sometimes I ask myself, do we have a voice as a people, as nations? Do we have a voice, especially to the international community? Can we speak? Does Africa really have a voice?
Well, I'll begin with our own story, the Kenyan story. This book, It's Our Turn to Eat by Michelle Arong. It accounts one of the most shocking, occurrences of our country's history, the Golden Bug scandal. You remember John Githogo, the whistleblower? Yeah. So this is the foundation. When you merge this book with The Looters and Grabbers by Joe Hamese, the former legislator, then you would understand. And The Politics of Betrayal as well, by the same author, Joe Hamese, you'd get a glimpse of what really ails this country. I mean, corruption, impunity is deeply rooted, that it is hard for you to shake the foundation without bringing the entire ceiling down. And that's why they will always try to protect that particular space by the elites, so that no one, becomes part and parcel of this particular elitism. That's why there's, political patronage. The other day, when the courts ruled against the, NGCDF, the National Government Constituency Development Fund, MPs were up in arms. Why? Because, yeah, I do admit, some of the areas in the country have developed because of CDF, but most MPs use the CDF as a patronage, as a form of slavery. Because when you control the future of an education kitty, then you expect the constituents to be worshipping you. And that will mean they have to be subject, to you time without number. So that's what is ailing us. We have no soul. I mean, the country long lost its soul. And I think it spreads out across Africa. Whatever we're speaking here right now, corruption, there's corruption in South Africa. There was state capture by the Guptas. I mean, you remember Jacob Zuma. When you go to Nigeria, I mean, massive corruption, massive poverty. So I think it's an African problem. And I think if there was an African renaissance, it has to mean that we have to do things differently. Hoping this time we would expect new results.
What do we need to do? What does the general population need to do?
The general population needs to look at the leaders we elected to office. It's high time, because it has been a cruel marriage, not just for Kenya, but even for Africa. Then it's high time to speak divorce. And by speaking divorce, it means you as a voter, you have to vote in right leaders. You have to vote in leaders who have your needs at heart. Leaders who understand, who you are as a person, as a population, and just be part and parcel of that, particular transformation. So that will mean emancipating our minds, because they always use our minds to get into our hearts, and that's where the breakdown is. So civic education is important, and it has been ongoing. We've also been doing our part as LSK to just sensitize people, especially to the Gen Z protest. Yeah, so civic education not just on protest, but also on the bills being passed by Parliament. How would this bill affect you if it is passed? Yeah, so on and so forth, and also emancipating ourselves from our tribal affiliations. That really has been a used tool, weaponized by politicians, from the presidency to the last man on the ground, because they used that to bring people against the other persons. In 2007, there was the 44 against one. This time, I mean, last year it was two against the rest. So this conversation will keep on, enlarge as long as we become comfortable. But like I said, when we flip the table, then the conversation changes, and I think that's what we need to do. Yeah.
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 And to Patrick now, what are you up to? What are you currently working on?
What I'm currently working on? Well, say for my legal career, I'm focused on again publishing my fifth book. Yeah, and being happy, living life as well. I have a couple of projects. I don't want to mention them here, but they're good things, and yeah, just to get to see how best do I become the fullest version of myself, and equally while impacting positively rather, into the lives and the people that look up to me, the people I interact with, the friends, but all those kind of people. So yeah, that's that.
Wow. If somebody wants to find you, how do they find you?
Well, I always try to be. Oh my god, I will expose my socials here. Well, on X, formerly Twitter, it's at the Gifted Pan. On Facebook is the Gifted Pan. On Instagram, it's I am the Gifted Pan. On TikTok, I am the Gifted Pan. That's it.
You are the gifted pain. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much for sharing with us your knowledge, your wisdom.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate also
Thanks.
having you on the show.
Thanks.
And also in such short notice, I would say.
Yeah, such short notice, but it was all worth the wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where our curtains fall for today's show. Thank you so much for joining with us to the very end. Today, we were sitting next to Patrick Lavince, the gifted pen shelf. And we've taken a journey through his books, from where he started and where he is, where he's headed to. He's told us the book he's currently reading. And I'm hoping one, if not all, of those titles has left a mark and has helped you pick up your next read. But what stood out for you from today's conversation? What is it that you've had from this conversation that got you thinking or got you going? Feel free to share with us on the comment section. And by the way, for a chance for us to win this week's Book of the Week, tell us, which one was Patrick's third book? He spoke about 4 books. He's written 4 books. Which one? Or what is the title of his third book? The first and the correct answer on our comment section gets our Book of the Week. And remember, this podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Kenya National Library Service, who are the Kenyan custodian of very many literary services, as indicated on their website. Check out Kenya National Library Service website, knls.ac.ke. And by the way, this week I discovered last week, I discovered at the 25th Nairobi International Book Fair, where KNLS was participating, that they have a data center So you guys with huge data sets, with nowhere to keep your data or to store your data, there is that provision at the Kenya National Library Service. So check them out. Check their website, knls.ac.ke. Which of their services do you require? Is it the ISBN number? Is it the books that you need to read? And remember, for only 20 shillings, you get to read the books for a whole day. 20 shillings. Also, this podcast has been brought to you in partnership with the Nuria Bookstore, who are the leading bookstore in Kenya for 4 years in a row. Yes, 4 years in a row. Check them out at nuria.com. And that is also the place where Patrick's 4 books are domiciled. You'll find all his 4 titles there. And another about 1,300 local titles. Remember, Nuria is the home of African books. Find them on nuria.com and also on a physical location at the Baza Plaza, first floor. And they will serve you. I'm happy to have made it this far at the end of the tail end of this podcast. I'm your host, Mulure Mike. Thank you so much for being here to this very end. Until the next one, have a good one.